Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
Hey, let's welcome everybody out today to episode 342 of I Am Salt Lake podcast. My name's Chris.
And my name's Chrissy. And if this is your first time listening to us, you probably wonder what this podcast is all about. We're here to share with you the stories of the people making the cool things that make Salt Lake. We're here to talk to musicians, artists, bartenders, just whoever has a really great story and is helping build this city.
Today on the podcast, we get to sit down and have an awesome conversation with Stephen Jerman. We talk about what inspired him to start the Utah Cheese Awards. Yes, you heard me right with that one, the Utah Cheese Awards. We talk about a documentary he created, and we also talk about some of his graphic design work that he's done, which has included the Downtown Farmers Market logo.
He's kind of an idol of mine now. I mean, he's done so much cool design work, and that wasn't even good enough. He did Utah Cheese Awards. It's so fun. But before we jump into that interview, let's give some quick love to our sponsors for this episode, Five Wives Vodka and Blip Billboards. We're going to tell you a little bit more about them later on in the podcast.
All right, guys, I got to talk about Farmers Market here for just a second. It is Farmers Market season in downtown Salt Lake City. It is happening every Saturday until October 20th at historic Pioneer Park right in downtown Salt Lake City. I know a lot of you listening to the podcast have never even gone yet. I know a lot of you that live in the outskirts have not made that little venture to downtown Salt Lake City. Go check it out. You will not be disappointed. It takes up the entire block of Pioneer Park. Like I said, it's happening every Saturday, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. It is free to get into. I mean, they have tons of produce vendors. They have tons of cool crafts and clothing made here locally, food made here locally in Salt Lake City. You have to check it out. It's family friendly, kid friendly, really good time. Like I said, Pioneer Park right in downtown. Go check it out. We're actually there a handful of Saturdays through the farmers market season. So make sure that you're connected with us on social media so you could check it out on the Saturdays that we're there.
All right, let's get into that conversation with Steve Jerman when he came over to the podcast studio and shared his story. Enjoy.
Did you grow up here in Utah?
I did.
There, or?
My parents are from Druab County. They moved up here when they were, my dad was in high school and then right after the war. And so their family was basically here. I have four siblings. And was born in Rose Park.
And you stayed here ever since, or did you move away at all?
Well, right when I got out of college, after basically 4 years and one quarter of college, I went to New York. I was urged to go to New York, so I went to New York City. And I lived in the East Village for a couple months till it was pretty clear that it just wasn't the right thing. And so,
why? Too busy, too much of a city?
Well, it's hard to make you kind of got to know somebody, I think. Luckily, I had somebody to stay with when I first got there, some fellow Utah State students who were, great. I should thank them to this day. And then I got a place with two other people about my age that were trying to make it. They were actually actors, and I got referred to them through another person from Utah State. It was just, I was trying to get a job in advertising, a traditional art director job, and it takes a while. I did do some kind of production work, but it was just a little rough. And
this was, years ago.
This was in fall of 1984. Part of the reason I wanted to go back there was to see some Grateful Dead shows.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm a Grateful Dead head. And some of my very first successes in business things were Grateful Dead t-shirts and stickers and stuff. Actually, my very first entrepreneurial kind of thing was a t-shirt that I did for the 1983 show at Park City, and of the Grateful Dead.
Because I read on your webpage that one of the members of the Grateful Dead wore one of these shirts.
Exactly. We were there hanging around Park City, and the Holiday Inn Yarrow Hotel there, and somebody said Phil's inside, so we went inside, and sure enough, there was Phil Lesh, and so I grabbed his shirt, gave it to him, and biggest, meatiest bass playing hand, shook my hand, and we got there the next day, and he walks out in the shirt. You know,
that is
needed a clean shirt. I don't know.
Great.
So that was a pretty big lift.
Sure, man.
So what did you even like? How did you even get into designing, or what was that entrepreneurial jump?
Well, I had the basic skills of graphic design production. I actually got those in high school at Skyline High School. My last year I did a vocational class, and it just I like to say it came to me in a dream, and it kind of did. It was Moroni as a skeleton, and then I used one of their very popular lyrics, "Spent the night in Utah," and I brought it out, maybe 5 weeks before the show, and went up to the Park City Arts Festival, and I clipped one onto my backpack and walked up and down the street, and people were like,
"So
can I buy one of those?"
You made T-shirts with the skeleton of Moroni.
Yes.
And was anybody offended by it?
No one was really offended.
Because it seems like people today would be offended by that.
It seems like people who would be offended probably wouldn't go up and talk to you.
What eventually happened is that was pretty successful. And then they came back about 4 years later, and I was further along, and I had met, I went to school with a great guy named Chris Schnabel, who now he works for Pixar. He's one of the artists up there in Pixar. And I asked him to do a more professional version, and it was pretty stunning. And I was selling those, and Grateful Dead merchandising did not like that. So once they saw something that was just not stamped out and had some creativity, they got a little Gestapo and said, "Oh, we're not going to let you in the show." But it was amazing. I would go out there after the show, and just people wanting to buy shirts right and left. And I didn't know what to do, but I would just like stuff the money down my pants.
Sure.
It was that quick.
So did you travel with the Dead at all, or was that only here in Utah?
I wouldn't call it traveling. I had some friends that I met from Utah State that we would go on short things like to Vegas or to Santa Fe, Red Rocks, that kind of thing, California, but not for more than 3 shows or so.
Sure. Very jealous. Never got to see the Dead play live. And
it was great.
I remember my brother, I have an older brother, Rob, who invited me when they played it was a Delta Center at the time. And he went to that show, and I can't remember why I said no, and I wished I would have gone now.
That was their last show there, and those were really good shows.
Yeah. Now, to back up a little bit, and maybe you mentioned it already, so you went to school to be a graphic designer.
I did, yes. I had been interested in art from a young age, and I took all the art classes I could, and I got into Skyline High and took commercial art. And the teacher there, the word was, well, if you want to make a living, you have to go into commercial art. I don't know if that is true or not, and Utah State was a good school, is a good school. A lot of the guy who did This Is Your Brain on Drugs was one of my classmates.
No kidding.
Yeah. Wow. So I was the first kid out of the 4 to actually to not go to the University of Utah, or out of the 5 to not go to the University of Utah. And, so, it was a good, well-rounded education. There were no computers, it was a little bit of how you do it, but mainly it was a lot of thinking, and a lot of really successful people in the world, advertising world, illustrators would come out and, give projects to the students and speak, and so it was a really good education there.
So was it tough? So when you learned without computers.
Right.
And then when computers were introduced, you kind of had to start learning computers. Did you kind of fight that a little bit, or did you embrace it? Well,
kind of what happened is we heard about this Macintosh computer, and this guy, Steve McRae, he's setting his type on this. And that means that, hundreds of dollars that you used to send to typesetters, which was a big part of the process, then you could make that yourself. So that was kind of what happened. And so that kind of merged. And so, we would do just the typesetting. And then after about 10 years, everything was done on there. But there was some period in between where we just use it for certain things.
Mm-hmm. Things that were more
expensive. My first computer was an SE20. And I said this, I tweeted this on the day that Steve Jobs died, which is really ironic that its screen was the size of a ham sandwich. It was a little 6x4 screen, and it was a slow, so you'd have to really be up on, your next move. So you got pretty good at doing that, and was actually really good at and for the first 10 years, that was kind of my skill. And there were maybe some older designers that didn't adapt as early. They would hire you. And I think having the knowledge was helpful. Computers can make mistakes real fast, and they can do stylistic things. And really, if you're just using it for that traditional style, it's there. I don't know what we do with them today, but I mean, can you imagine living your life without a computer, having to have a legal pad and do all that stuff like we used to do?
Oh yeah, it was way more like labor intensive.
Well, it seems like you could be more efficient now, get more work done, get more stuff designed.
And that's why I think the value is kind of dropped. That's anybody can figure it out, and it happens. You can do it so quickly.
It's true, but you can teach yourself to be skilled, right? But you still have to have some talent. There's still that.
I'd like to think so.
Chrissy, she's a great graphic designer too. At least I think so. I mean, she's done all the logos and all the design work for I Am Salt Lake and all of that. And
I still consider myself a wannabe.
I couldn't do it though. I mean, before you came along, all the I Am Salt Lake stuff looked like garbage. I couldn't do it. And so we need people like, speaking of logo designs here, Steve, when I was looking around and kind of snooping around, I'm like, I'm going to be talking to this guy. I want to figure, you did the Downtown Farmers Market logo?
Yeah, that's probably one of my best known works.
And I'm like, get out of town. I'm like, I love the Farmers Market.
So I didn't, the majority of the illustration was done by a guy named Greg Newbold, but, I was kind of chasing that account, so to speak, looking for the kind of accounts that I could get. And I met with him, and they said, we really like this piece of art. Can we do something with it? And I said, sure. And so I created the typography and layered it and all. But I also told them, at that point they had like a cardstock thing, 2-color. I said, you can have a full like 11/17 poster for the price that you're doing this, and you can give a poster out every year. So I got them to do that, and I had that account for about 4 or 5 years.
So you were designing some of the posters too, but you're not doing anything with them now.
No, it's been a while.
Do you want it back?
Not necessarily.
I was going to bring somebody in, but I'm just kidding.
I would do it.
I'm kidding. No.
Do you ever get burnt out though? Do you ever get burnt out on designing and feel like I just need to shift gears? I need to go do something else.
I've just come to the conclusion that it's
who you are.
Well, it is who I am, but to be truly successful in self-actualization, there's things kind of above that. So that's like, making t-shirts, having a line of t-shirts, that's a little bit kind of above that. And, if I had something really, and I have hired a lot of artists before, then it'd be less important. But I think I have pretty good instincts. And so,
Now, what are you hiring artists for? You say you're hiring artists.
You'll
like illustration.
More their style, an individual style of something that you don't necessarily do. And then I was an art director for several magazines, and so in all those magazines, we would hire photographers and illustrators. And,
which magazines have you done?
First one was called New West.
Okay,
and it wasn't the New West out of L.A., but it was started by a guy named Mark Taylor. He was a very interesting guy. And he started a magazine called Neo in the 80s, and then he came out with this kind of Western lifestyle thing, and it was really, really kind of a nice magazine. He got some money to do it, but after about 5 issues, he wasn't the kind that could handle the issues you see when you start a business.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so they shuttered that, but that gave me enough experience to get a job at Utah Business Magazine. Their editor was married to a guy I worked for, Dave Newbold, who's one of the oldest, best advertising guys in town. So I went and met with them, and I worked there, and I really did pretty well there. I was able to take it and redesign it, and just
you could kind of really put your creative efforts
made it
into
new. We were Fast Times was a magazine that we kind of really liked. And I had the ability to get illustrators to do nice projects for not too much money, just kind of speaking the same language. And I think it was at the height of that magazine, but then that was right before the .com bubble burst.
Oh,
so,
right.
The economy was a lot better.
What year was that? What year was that?
Like 99?
I was there till 2000, 2001. Then after that, I worked for a craft magazine called, it started out as Crafts, and then it was Paper Crafts. I don't know if you heard of Creating Keepsakes magazine. It was
the name rings a bell.
Scrapbooking magazine. Not at all my aesthetic.
I was going to say, no wonder you were really big into scrapbooking, Kristen.
Yeah, nice try. It's your magazine. Is there like a project that you've worked on that you absolutely love and are so proud of?
One of the things that I really like is I did a book for Gibbs Smith called First Tracks, A Century of Skiing in Utah. I did that about that same time, and it was done for the Olympics, and they had arranged to get all the art from the skiing part of the University of Utah Special Collections. We just got digital because those pieces never leave the museum. But they saw the book Beatles Anthology, and they really liked that. So I did that. So I was able to just go do some crazy illustration kind of stuff. And I'm still really proud of that. That's definitely one of the best things that I've done. I did the Utah Arts Festival in 2003. I liked the way that turned out.
Now, what'd you do for them? Like just the graphics?
The whole thing.
Like the logo?
For many years, they were hiring a different designer every year. So you start with the logo, and then the projects would just come. So,
like you do the signage and the website design.
And that was the problem, though, because, nonprofits, if they can get money to do another thing, then another project pops up. So
and then you get worn down.
Well, and that was back when the field was just more robust, know. These days, people wouldn't think about it as much, and the way they work and the assets are reused a lot more easily.
Mm-hmm.
Those type of things. I had this line of clothing for 5 years, and
what was the name of it?
It's called Natty Threads.
Okay.
It was
this was your clothing line.
It was, yeah. I started it. Got a guy I went to college with to give me some money, and we went to a trade show. First year didn't have much luck. It's down in San Diego. It's called Action Sports Retailer. It was the skate thing. The whole magazine, that whole industry is kind of gone. And it was right when it was changing from like Quicksilver neon type shirts to Stussy, more dark street wear. And since I had kind of a clean design aesthetic, it was different. But I got some Japanese companies buying, and I kind of followed up, and then they said next year go to Magic, which is a men's apparel show in Vegas, and set up there, and it just broke loose.
Wow.
All right. I know both of you have seen the big digital blip billboards when you're driving up and down I-15. Did you know how easy it is to get your business up on these billboards? A lot of people have no idea where to even start with this. And let me tell you, it's actually very, very inexpensive to do this. Rather than the typical month-long contract that can cost you thousands of dollars and only have it up in one location, Blip sells per flip, aka a blip, on digital billboards. A blip can go anywhere from 7.5 to 10 seconds, depending on the billboard, and one of these blips can actually cost you as little as 1 penny. You can be specific on which board you want to advertise on, local here in the Salt Lake Valley, or you can go nationwide if you want to. You can also pick the times that you want to advertise. And guess what? Here's the best part. You only pay for the time that you want your message to be up there. I'm sure the both of you are asking, Chris, why do I want to put my business up on a billboard? Okay, let me tell you this, okay? You're going to gain awareness. You're going to get your brand name out there to as many people as you can. Billboards are effective in building your brand. And when you have a local business, this is important. I Am Salt Lake Podcast is actually in the middle of a billboard campaign right now with Blip Billboards, and it has been such an awesome experience. It has been so fun to find these listeners that are finding out about the podcast through these billboards. And let me tell you another cool thing. It is so easy to change your art up on these billboards, right? You're not stuck with one design up on this billboard for an entire month. You could change it every day if you want to. Head on over to blipbillboards.com. This is where you can find more information. You can get going with your billboard campaign. You can find out the billboards that you can put your message out there. You get to target your market, advertise whatever you want, right? Head on over to blipbillboards.com. And of course, many thanks to Blip Billboards for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by Five Wives Vodka. You know, when you're in Texas, go ahead, drink your Tito's. But when you're here in Salt Lake City, you drink Five Wives vodka. So the next time you hit up your state liquor store or you go to your local neighborhood bar, ask for Five Wives vodka by name. They actually have 3 different flavors of Five Wives vodka, which Chrissy and I are going to tell you about. I'm excited to tell you about these because for the longest time, I was only familiar with the original flavor. That's the kind of guy I guess I am. I don't really do a lot of snooping around, but they have 3 different flavors. They have the original Five Wives vodka. This is made from Utah mountain spring water, so you know it's going to be good. It's 100% distilled corn spirit and gluten-free. The spring is hidden in beautiful Ogden Canyon. It's inaccessible by vehicle, so the water is actually hiked out 5 gallons at a time.
Five Wives also makes a flavor called Sinful, which is a flavored vodka with a delicious cinnamon taste. And it's not like other cinnamon products that leave you with that cinnamon candy taste. Sinful is more like a morning cinnamon roll, and it only has 76 calories per ounce.
There's also the Five Wives Heavenly. This is, of course, a flavored vodka with a delicious vanilla taste. Heavenly's rich, buttery vanilla flavor, it comes through without coating your taste buds with sugar, and this is going to result in more vanilla and less calories. Head on over to fivewivesvodka.com. This is where you can find out more information about them. There's recipes. And like I said, next time you go to the state liquor store, pick up a bottle of Five Wives vodka, pick up an extra bottle for the buddies barbecue this weekend, or maybe the birthday, or if you go to your local bar, or if you go to a bar downtown, ask for Five Wives vodka by name. And of course, many thanks to Five Wives vodka for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Let's talk about the Utah Cheese Awards, because I am fascinated by this. I actually was telling my mom before we came here, because she watches our little baby Lucy on the nights we come and podcast. I said, she always asks, who are you talking to tonight? And I said, this guy. And I said, he did the Utah Cheese Awards. And she's like, there's a Cheese Awards in Utah? Is there enough dairy here? Because she's used to Minnesota, right? And even Chrissy's from Wisconsin.
So I'm a bit skeptical. You should have brought cheese for me to eat so I could really make sure Utah cheese is good.
What is this? I mean, I'm unfamiliar with it. My listeners, I'm sure, are.
Well, in 2014, I moved up to Cache Valley. I was looking
they got the cheese
for a
up
break. They're known for cheese. And I was up there for a couple years, and chances to do design weren't really that great. But in the back of my mind, I'd always been interested in maybe making cheese in Cache Valley somehow. And I was down outside the Cafe Ibis, and I saw a poster that said, "Live and work on a farm." Oh, this sounds good, and it's like many things I've tried out for over the years. You send in, you don't know if you're going to get it. And sure enough, I got it. So I worked on this small cheese farmstead for 4 months, doing everything from milking cows, cleaning up after the cows, assisting in making the cheese, which was a lot of stirring, cleaning. And then twice a week, we cleaned all the wheels of cheese off. And then, a month into it, Cache Valley Gardener's Market started. So go down and sell the cheese, and pretty much got immersed in it. And, part of my feeling about that position was the cheesemaker, you were kind of there to, it was almost kind of like a courtly thing. You had the king and the queen of the cheese, and then she got bored, and so we would talk about everything in the Utah food scene and everything. So I got a pretty good understanding. And so after I left that, I was up there for a few more months, and it didn't seem like it was going anywhere. And then I got offered a job in Deer Valley, which unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, didn't work out. And here I am in this new Salt Lake, and what am I going to do? And it had been in the back of my mind. So I just, at that point, just started this thing. And
the thing is the Utah Cheese Awards.
Cheese Awards. There are cheese award shows, nationally, internationally. They're fairly expensive for the people to do. At least they need to give them, a couple $100 worth of cheese and everything. And I thought, well, how can I do this and make it a little bit easier for these people? So I just started there. I found out everybody who's making cheese, put up a website. And so I guess that's where my design skills kind of look fairly professional. And
it's a nice website. I'm hard to please.
Oh yeah.
And I was like,
Chrissy's a website
I like
snob.
I did everything I could to kind of promote it. And I knew that cheese is a slow moving thing. It takes aging, and people just don't invent cheeses every year. but there are a lot of related foods that Utah's, that are on what a cheese board or a cheese plate. And cheese boards are just amazing things. You can put anything together, just beautiful to look at. And so I thought, well, I'll do a cheese division, and then I will do a division that has smoked cured meats, bread, sauces, fruit, nuts, and chocolate.
Okay. So to back up, because I'm really unfamiliar with all of this, can you explain it to someone like me? What is the Cheese Awards?
The intelligence of it is getting judges together and getting samples of cheese submitted and judging the cheese. What is the best hard cheese? What's the best soft cheese, goat cheese? And then with that knowledge, then presenting that to the public, in support of these makers, and then selling the public at a later event a plate of the cheese, and kind of going from there.
This is award-winning cheese.
Exactly.
So how did you find experts in cheese? Like, how did you find judges?
Well, that's funny.
I'll be a judge.
I like
Me
cheese.
too.
I met pretty much all of them in bars, and that can be good and bad. Bars have kind of been my socialization.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
I drink beer. I don't drink too much hard liquor, but so I met him. One I was most excited about was Trent Harris. He's an independent filmmaker.
He did Ruben and Ed. Yeah, Ruben and Ed.
He's just a wild guy, and he says, "Oh, I'll do it," And then I had a guy from a local restaurant who ended up getting caught in the eclipse traffic, and then a woman who I had met through Cafe Ibis in Logan, who had moved down there. So I just asked a few people, and Utah Public Radio was interested in it. And I got, working around advertising and marketing, I kind of got the basics of, and having education in it of PR and that. So she filled in for these other people. And once I got over that hump, and I tell you, it was things I'd never imagined, like who is going to care about my little cheese contest? And you would be surprised. Now I have got Ted Scheffler, I think the foremost well-known food critic in town. I brought back Tasha Rustad. She's a baker at Current. I have the Current food writer for the City Weekly, and I have a woman, Amanda McGraw, who was recommended to me, and she's a chef at Copper Onion, which is a highly rated.
So do you have new judges each year? Or is
it's a work in progress. I really liked what Tasha did, and she was so easy to work with and so meticulous that I invited her back.
So this is only the second year, though?
Yes.
Second year.
I wanted to get male and female. I wanted to get a balanced type of a thing. Mm-hmm. And so, you ask a lot of people, and some people turn you down. Some people never return your calls. But after getting through that first year, it became a lot easier. Like getting Ted, I thought was, well, this is pretty good, and now I've got them gifts, and now I'm going to have actual medals. And so I think after this second year, it's going to be fairly cemented that people want to do that. Mm-hmm. The major cheesemakers, they just see, this is easy. First of all, I'm letting them submit 3 samples for free. So there's almost no cost, except that they have lots of cheese. Anybody, these products, 8 ounces of your product is nothing, and they got to get it to me, and that's it. And then they have all this exposure. So somebody like the Beehives and Heber Valleys of the world, they just see right away that this is great. Then some people that don't even have a website, they were into it, and in a couple months they're making contacts. And Caputo's was very helpful. Caputo's had a lot of emotion, as a couple of the cheese makers tried to get in there and couldn't get in there. So they had quite a gestalt. And I had the samples delivered to them the first year because I thought that would help. And this year I'm not doing that. So I we judged the first one at Caputo's, and they were very helpful. So they have some great cheese. They won Best of Show.
Does this happen like on one day?
Yeah.
When is it?
So we're set up to do the judging is Saturday, October 25th. We're doing it at noon. We're doing it at City Bird Cafe.
Okay.
Which is in the City County building. I went to talk to the economic development people in Salt Lake, and they were like, well, we need something that's more Salt Lake oriented. But I just kind of saw that thing in that building, and they're not open on Saturday. So I think that'll be a great place to do it. So we'll get in there, counting about 2 hours, depending on how we do it. I've got the food writer for the Tribune is now. I've given her an exclusive opportunity to come down and do it because some of these other people are actually food writers too. So that was one of the funnest days I had last year. First of all, I walked in and I didn't know what we were going to get. So I said, wow, we got quite a bit of stuff, And then it was a whirlwind cutting it up, and I'm fixing all of that.
You have to like organize all the cheeses into
and then you end up with
categories.
a lot of cheese left over, which is quite beneficial.
Can people come watch, or is it like kind of a closed judging?
I'm keeping that closed.
Okay.
Man.
I want to watch.
But the right person might be able to sneak in there.
Well, look at that.
Wink.
Gave me a little wink over here.
Yeah.
So the second year, October 25th, you said, is that what?
So then the first year on October 28th, we had what I called Expo Fest, and that was kind of put together a little bit quickly. But I had about 8 vendors. Most of them had submitted to the show, and some of them won. Bread Right Bakehouse been supportive, and they did really well. That's a bakery to watch. And he's just been doing it about a year. And so, but this year, and I can go tell you this, that we're going to have our public event October 20th at Shades of Pale.
And you said this is a public event?
This is a public event. So what we'll be doing is essentially what we'll be doing there. We won't have as many vendors. It will be 21 and over, but we'll sell tickets for the cheese plates, and then they can go over to the bar and pair it with Shade's great beer. We'll give the awards out.
Okay, very cool. I'll have to mark that on my calendar too.
Yeah.
Now, you don't need to give me I'm just curious, like, do you have a favorite kind of cheese? Because Chrissy brought home the grossest cheese like a month ago.
Whatever.
What was the name of it? What was
Brie.
Brie. Do you like Brie?
I like Brie.
Brie's
my-
great,
get outta here.
right?
No,
Put
I'm
some
kidding.
fruit on
I'm
it.
kidding.
Some
There's-
sour cherry.
There's all kinds of, there are cheeses that are soft cheeses and hard cheeses. The hard cheeses are primarily what you're seeing here, and they're cooked for a long time, and they're pressed and aged. And then there are the softer cheeses where they're not cooked very much and they become quite runny. The fascinating thing, and I'm just kind of learning that because I said in January after, still not enamored with the way the graphic design world is doing. I want to kind of do something in cheese. So I started making it at home. And I've kind of developed what I want to do. The harder cheeses they're harder to make, and there's more processes. But when you're really looking at, there's just about, besides milk, a culture, and a rennet, which is the coagulating ingredient, there are only 3 or 4 other things, or 2 or 3 other things that they add to cheese, and that's it.
And they can make all those different varieties of cheese.
So
with just a few
around
things.
the world, what you see is basically how they were able to make it, what they had to do to make it, how they had to carry it, what kind of molds they had. I mean,
interesting. So it's mostly about the process.
Yeah.
It creates the flavor.
Yeah. And so liking to think I'm innovative and trying to streamline things. I've been developing my own, and I'm not pressing it because that's a whole nother thing. There's also brining, which is, on the harder cheeses, they soak them in salt water, and then the salt goes in. Salt is the other ingredient I left out that's absolutely necessary. But the other ones, you just pour it on. So these softer cheeses, they just pat the salt on. But they don't last forever. That's the thing.
The soft cheeses?
Yeah. These harder cheeses, I just read this thing in the cheese magazine where in Switzerland, they had this thing where when someone was born, they would make a wheel of cheese with the idea that they would eat it at their funeral.
Wow.
I mean, these cheeses will last a long time.
What's your opinion on moldy cheese?
Well,
I know that sounds weird, but
I like it.
Now, are we talking about cheese that's gone moldy? That's different.
It is different, but I'm curious. I'm always curious.
Penicillium roqueforti is the one of those several things that you add, and you've heard of Roquefort cheese, and basically they developed theirs by taking a certain rye bread in France and putting them in these caves, but basically I think they just grow it in a lab now, and so that mold is essential to this flavor. So the favorite one I had has this, you could call it mold in it. And so inside the cheese, it's fine. When you see blue cheese and you kind of see these blue stripes in it, that's because they've poked a hole in it for the oxygen to get down. So without the oxygen, you won't get the blue mold.
Oh,
so
interesting.
the one I'm making doesn't have the blue mold, but it does have a flavor. So yeah, I think blue cheese is great.
See, now, when I think of moldy cheese, I think of when I grew up, there would be a block of cheddar cheese in the fridge,
Yes.
and my mom would cut the mold off.
Yeah.
And my mom
and
did
I
the same
swear
thing.
it tasted weird, man. Like it was.
I mean, it might have if
disgusting.
it was a contained, the mold flavor could have.
Is that even healthy?
I don't know.
It's perfectly fine. And,
You think so?
And when I was on the farmstead cutting up cheese, occasionally they weren't into blue cheese, but occasionally you'd get a little. That's what I wanted to eat because it has the flavor.
Oh.
So I think blue cheese is fine, but really you're just down to a very few things. I've heard that Gosner's up, and this is lore, but Gosner's has cheese that's 20 years old. It's just covered in mold. They'll bring it out in Christmas, but you're talking 10, 20 years. Yeah.
Christmas mold.
Yeah.
So when you're not like with the cheese awards, you're a graphic designer too. I mean, what are some of your other hobbies and interests?
Oh, and you're really funny on Twitter, by the way.
thanks.
When we get around to that, follow him on Twitter.
She mentioned that.
I like doing social media. I always liked art and messing around with that, though I haven't done much of it in the last year and a half. I've kind of more been focused on other things.
Are there like any other projects that I wasn't aware of that you have going on here in Utah?
made a
I'd say I
documentary.
have a son. I like to spend time with him.
Oh, yeah. There's a documentary. Let's talk about that for a second here. What?
So my documentary, well, I was up in Logan there, and it was kind of a thing where I'd been in Salt Lake, and I'd had some kind of, I don't want to be a complainer, I had a bunch of heavy stuff happen. And finally I decided, I need a fresh kind of outlook. So I thought I would go to Denver, and that was right when they were changing some of their laws over there. And I got there, and it just wasn't right for me. So
You're talking about like the marijuana law. Well, that seems like it'd be right. Why? No, come on.
It just wasn't.
Sometimes it doesn't work out.
It's like they do that in Utah also. It's just not legal. But
There's a market everywhere, right?
yeah, and it's like, but the rest of the, it's just you weigh everything.
Sure.
And
I'm giving you a hard time,
yeah,
Steve.
it's funny, that's gotten so huge now, and I'm kind of like,
I subscribe to the Entrepreneur newsletter in my email, so I get it on a daily basis from entrepreneur.com. It's always only about cannabis.
Yeah, well, it's getting big.
The cannabis industry is like the only thing people are talking about now.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the documentary.
So anyway,
yeah.
I came back to Logan, and all the time I'd gotten a pretty decent video camera a couple years earlier, and I was doing these little diaries. And so I went to the Logan Film Festival. It's now known as the Block Film Festival. And I saw a really great documentary about, it's called Prophet's Prey. It was about Warren Jeffs and polygamy. I just went back to my place, and I just thought, I might have a kind of a story. So I kind of put everything, and I kind of did have a story. And then at that point, I said, well, I should talk to some other people. Next thing I knew, I had about 15 interviews with Logan people, and I just put the documentary together. There was no budget at all. I got a hard drive to put some of the stuff on it, and I got a friend from college to be a donor. But otherwise, it was just a really quick and dirty. Production-wise, it had a lot of my personality in it.
And you had fun making it.
It was fun, and I got it into the Logan Film Festival. And so as I submitted it, the day I was driving out of Logan to come work in Deer Valley, and it was kind of like closing that chapter of my life. And so it got in, and it's really I've shown it publicly twice at the film festival, and then I went up and showed it again up in Logan. And it's all about Logan. It's about me and Logan. So it's a really kind of small niche. But when I was up there in Logan, I was able to film Temple Grandin. I don't know if you know who she is, but she is one of the persons most associated with autism, and I kind of feel that I'm somewhere on the spectrum, probably bunch of people in my family are on the spectrum, but so I put her down as the co-star, and so it's got on Amazon. It's kind of collected that crowd, but that was just a minute of it, It was just one, and it was kind of like, I don't want to say it's disjointed, but it's, kind of this journey, and then I get settled, and then, things happen. So.
Have you thought about making more documentaries?
I have thought about it. I
film?
still make them. I think I should up my production values, and I'm urged to do it. But, it's kind of like the story. The story worked out pretty well. It kind of like came together. I can kind of.
Is it something that people can find and watch?
It's on Amazon
right on.
Prime. So if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free. It's called The Cost of Being Different. The name came from a guy named Dennis Hinkamp, who's a great writer who works for Utah State University. He was the first person that I interviewed, and he just said, the cost of being different in Logan is lower. And what he meant was that, he said if you go to Boulder or Portland, you have to be, a dreadlock freak or whatever, and Logan, you can be different just by being pretty mild. Mm-hmm. And then I just kind of took it to be who I am as a different person, my experiences. And so
I love it.
And I'm happy with it. Yeah, it was a really a solid thing in
it sounds like a cool thing that everybody should watch. And I think we all as humans have that whole insecurity about being different or being unaccepted or being,
yeah.
It seems like it would really help to see someone else's story. It's always a good thing.
I like it. One of the things I also proved that I'm pretty good at negotiating things, and often for just the value of, like for instance, when I asked Dennis Hinkamp, he goes, sure, that sounds fun. And every time somebody has said, like Matt Caputo, sure, that sounds fun, you have one of your best partners ever, because they're not worried about,
They're not stressed. They just are doing it because they love it.
And, yeah, it was fun. But I was able to get a lot of really good musicians to let me use their music. I don't know if heard of Jason Isbell. He's huge now. He let me use one.
So you're like on texting terms with him, or what?
You go to their website, you find their manager.
Oh, and you just email
you write
them.
their manager. You show them a clip, and the clip's got the music in it, and it's right there.
Well, it's good promotion for bands too, though.
Yeah, they're not signing a contract. They're smart enough to know that, but they're sure, Now, if it was like, in every theater nearby, you'd be getting a phone call from them. But for these things. So, Jerry Joseph, who's a long time friend of mine, great band from back east, Gorilla Panda Dub Squad.
Never heard of them. No.
Yeah, they're a reggae band, predominantly kind of a white reggae band, really grooving. And, I kind of looking to fill in one spot where I went up to the Cache Valley Ladies Hat Party. It was up in Lava that year, and it's this party that's been going on for 35 years where these women get dressed up and get smashed, dress up like they're in the 20s.
Are you
and it was
serious?
In this beautiful place there. Yeah.
That sounds incredible. Yeah. How do we not know about that?
I don't know.
I would drive up there for that.
You should. And I think you can go. It's in Logan. It's generally been in Logan, but they had it up there for a couple of years, which they had it in this great place. I think it's called Lava, or anyway, it's right by the river. It's got this big.
The Lava Hot Springs up there by Idaho.
Yeah. Or Soma. But it's just a great place. And I was going around photograph. I didn't know what to do. You're called basically it's all women. So, but they allow men to come up and serve these women. And
I'm liking this more and more.
Do whatever you want. So I got up there, and I was kind of quite a bit overdressed, but I had my camera. So I just went around and started taking pictures. And there's this one woman, and she was like 75, 80 years old. She was kind of dressed up like Janis Joplin, as were several. And I'd say they're getting smashed there. And so I started taking her pictures, and she just kind of turned on. So a little bit later, there's this big labyrinth. You can see this in the movie. That she started going into this labyrinth, and I'm filming her, and her daughter comes up to me and says, "Do you know how old she is?" And I think she, late 50s, early 60s. And she's like, she's 79 years old, and she just lost her husband. And today she just this has been so good for her, because she just
let loose.
She just let loose, and she just walks by, and you can just tell it's, yeah. So I use that reggae. I've been into reggae. I did one of the things that I haven't mentioned, but I did this shirt called the Lion of Zion t-shirt for a while. It was one of my most notable accomplishments, for KRCL. So I've been into reggae for a while. So.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it was fun. It was fun putting together, getting people to come together, and it's not a moneymaker, but it was very therapeutic.
Yeah. Let's talk Salt Lake City. We talk it on every episode. Favorite local eating spots. This is a favorite question, Steve.
Okay.
Curious if you have an answer.
Well, you could probably place a pretty good bet that everybody says the red iguana.
Not everybody. I'm actually surprised on how few say the red iguana.
My experience with the red iguana is that when I came down out of college in 85 and I was in art space, that Ramon Cardenas Jr. opened a little tiny place on 3rd West, which he called the Red Iguana, and then basically turned that into what it is now. So I just think the Red Iguana, I mean, it has some haters because of the lines, but it's great.
They're not that bad.
And you know what? If there's a line, it only means the food is so good it's worth waiting in line for.
I like that place. God, it just depends, you know. I believe in that first thought, best thought. Oh my, for Vietnamese banh mi. I like that a lot.
Okay, yeah. No, I know I'm putting you on the spot, and you're like, "Oh my gosh!"
Name a cuisine, and I'll tell you.
Or here's a. Do you have? You mentioned you're a beer drinker. Do you go out very often to drink a beer? Do you have a favorite?
Quite regularly.
Do you have a favorite place? Favorite place that you like to get a beer?
I really like Fisher's when it opened.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've been going to a bunch of them. Shades of Pale, I like. It's totally funky. The very first time I went there, I was still living in Logan, and it was like you go through this old meat packing.
Yeah.
It was like a grindhouse film. And some of these other ones, Taproom has traditionally been my bar. I live in the Sugar House area, and so from early 90s, I was going in there. I've been going into my ex-wife's place quite a bit.
That's a fun place.
It is a fun place. There's some great conversations in there. It's super cheap. It's the bartenders are good. I just
it's
found
cash
out.
only, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I ever share the story you mentioned? Did I ever tell you the story, Chrissy? How
you told me, but I don't know if the
it was right
listeners have
after
heard.
my divorce, when I was 35, and I had a birthday, and so I did my birthday party at my ex-wife's place, and I put it on like a Facebook invite, and a friend of mine actually thought he went to my legitimate ex-wife's house thinking he's like, why would he have a birthday with like his ex-wife?
That's
like,
classic.
so you made me think of that. It made me think of that place.
I also go to Dick and Dixie's.
Yeah. They fixed that. Used to be Andy's back in the day. Man.
I like the location. They have a good beer list. I've been going to Junior's a lot, or I was more. That's kind of where I ran into Trent Harris again. And you can go in there, and it's like these old guard. You got Trent Harris, Ken Sanders, Will Bagley, foremost Utah historian, the guy who runs the library. You have these kind of old people there, and
you can just sit there and talk,
it's just,
man.
And heavy regulars. Yeah. And so I find that the bars, are just great places to meet people and learn things that you never would learn, you know, and I'm just mainly a beer drinker.
I love it. Let's now can people hire you for graphic design?
They can.
Yeah, like if people let's,
they haven't been,
if they want to pay.
Let's run down the list. Like, how can people see your work?
Well,
like your website.
I have my website was been for quite a long time. It's StephenRJerman.com. That's with a V and a J. I don't know. I guess my dad always had his initial, and so I've always put it out there. But it's in hindsight, it's been kind of helpful because you would not believe there are 5 or 6 different Steve Germans in Utah.
No kidding.
And across the country. It's amazing. It's an amazing phenomenon. So that's with a V and a J. And that's where I've got some portfolio stuff. I'm generally not, and I've been pushing myself a little bit further. I've kind of been interested in doing maybe food and beverage kind of packaging, but I'm just not really. It's just so changed that my efforts are kind of into doing some other things. So the one thing one piece that I haven't mentioned, the beanie I gave you, was one of the things that I've been doing to make a little money for about 20 years is I'm the licensee for Everett Roos. And Everett is a fascinating story. He was a young guy from California who traveled the West in the early 1930s just on foot with a couple donkeys and his dog. And he went for 4 summers. He went up the California coast and all the way over to Mesa Verde. And then his last journey, he made it to Escalante, Utah, and he disappeared. There's just no one knows what happened. In about 95, after having this reggae t-shirt company and being exposed to kind of how all that stuff works, I got the rights to do reproductions of his work. And so I've been doing that. And, since that time, he's become a lot more popular. And, they thought they found his remains about 5 years ago. It's an interesting story. an Indian guy heard a story that I don't know if we have time to get into, but it involved some Indians in the 30s seeing this white guy get killed by other American Indians. And it's kind of loose, they say they were a different tribe and everything, but long story short, they were buried, and this Indian guy buried him in the traditional way, which is just kind of stuffing him in some rocks. And one of their medicine mans, after the guy who saw it, said that got cancer or something, and said, well, that's because you touched that white kid's blood, and you need to go get a lock of his hair or something like that. And that repeated again with his daughter. So this guy, I think his name was Danny Belson, was a kind of an outfitter guy, heard the story and went out, and within like a day or two found these remains. And everybody was so excited about it. And so they got some of them. And in the meantime, other people were like, the FBI were not very good about it. And state geologists insisted it wasn't them. But they went and they sent them to Boulder, and they got a positive DNA. So here is this amazing mystery. And so, next thing the New York Times is calling up. We have a photo, half page in the New York Times. But this guy, Kevin Jones, who was a state geologist, just wasn't set with it. He says, no, he's like, the teeth are wrong. And then there would be this back well. Our family has those teeth. And so one of the older Roos brothers was somehow involved with the government, had access to the military's DNA lab in Virginia.
And retested it.
They retested it, and it was false. And they were just ready to do the family tradition, which was to, cremate the remains and then put them into the Santa Barbara Bay when that happened. So.
Man, I want to go research that because that sounds fascinating.
It's fascinating. But the thing is, he was an amazing guy. He wrote this poetry in his writings. Couple of his journals, or at least one of them, kind of got stolen in the whole thing. The family they were at the mercy. I'm redoing one of the sites, but there are 8 to 10 books, 3 or 4 different documentaries. There's a play here. Now there's a play in France about it. There's just all this information about it. And, but he did these wood blocks. Mm-hmm. And so he was artistically inclined. His mom was an artist. And so he did these woodcut that are just phenomenal.
And you got the rights to reproduce them.
And they reproduce really well. And so I got prints because that's the main thing. And then I do T-shirts and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Very cool. One more question here from Chrissy. You got one more final question? All right.
I'm going to use my always question. If you could give our listeners one piece of life advice, what would it be?
Again, the first thing that popped in my head is don't say you're not going to talk to anybody for the rest of their life. Communication is really key. Try to communicate with people.
Did you hear that, Chrissy?
I did hear that.
Yeah, I've seen that a couple times. In fact, one of my friends in California, he's going through a thing with his father's estate and his sister. Oh, I'm never going to talk to her once this is done. I think that's just a mistake. I've seen it happen. Just try to communicate with people. And I've traditionally been shy and not a great communicator in person, probably Asperger's or something like that. But I've been good to do it on paper. So, and I see the same thing kind of with my son, I mean, his verbal versus his written is just totally different. So I would say that was the thing. Try to communicate the best. But I've developed a lot of those things.
Very cool.
That's all.
Well, I've had a great conversation.
I had a great time. This has been fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you so much
than I ever imagined.
Yeah, time. I mean, it goes by fast.
It does.
I tell people once we get down and start talking, it goes by fast. But I always tell people, let's catch up down the road. You never know what new things or just.
I like to do interesting things. I don't know.
We'll wait for your next interesting thing. I'm sure there'll be more.
Yeah. And we'll see you at that Cheese Award show.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Many thanks again to Steve Jerman for joining us on this episode of the podcast and sharing his story. You can head on over to our website, iamsaltlake.com/342 for all the links for you to get in touch with him, and go reach out to Stephen and let him know you heard him on the podcast.
All right, guys, we love reviews. We especially love reviews on Apple Podcasts. They're really fun to read. It's a great way to know what you guys think about the show. If you have not left us a review yet, you can head to iamsaltlake.com/iTunes, and this will actually forward you to Apple Podcasts, where you can leave a review for the podcast. We got a recent review here from our friend Hal. He is actually from New York, the New York Launch Pod. We met him at Podcast Movement a few weeks ago out in Philadelphia, and I guess he's in love with the podcast now or something anyways. He wrote, I am in love with I Am Salt Lake. He says, this podcast is phenomenal. Chris and Chrissy do a fantastic job covering Salt Lake City through a variety of interesting guests and topics. Also, it just puts a smile on your face. A must listen whether you're in Salt Lake City or not, like me. So thank you so much, Hal, for leaving that iTunes review. iTunes reviews are a great way to support the show. So head on over to iamsaltlake.com/iTunes. Also, I want to give a shout out to Ben from Salt City Custom Framing. Many thanks for the recent donation. Donations are another great way to help support this podcast. And if you would like to make a one-time donation, head on over to paypal.me/IamSaltLake and you can send a donation for any amount that you choose. But this is really exciting. I want to talk about this one. I've been really eager to talk about Celebrate the Bounty. It is happening on Thursday, September 13th. This year, Local First Utah will be revealing all things local at the soon-to-be-open new location of Cafe Molise and BTG Wine Bar at 404 Southwest Temple. They are shaking up this event this year by pairing select Utah eateries with Utah distilleries to collaborate on a killer cocktail and bite pairings featuring their favorite local products. Restaurants so far that are included: The Rest, The Dispensary, Cafe Trio, Zest, Cafe Molise, and Hearth. So why should you be there? Celebrate the Bounty is Local First Utah's annual fundraiser and is the place for Salt Lake City's foodies and locally minded consumers to come together and explore spectacular offerings from Utah's finest locally owned restaurants and now distilleries. Head on over to localfirst.org and then click on the campaigns tab. Scroll down from there to Celebrate the Bounty. This is where you can find out more information about this event. Chrissy and I will be there, so it'd be great to meet some other listeners of this podcast. And so mark that on your calendar. September 13th at Cafe Molise and BTG Wine Bar, 404 Southwest Temple.
Many thanks again to our sponsors for this episode, Five Wives Vodka and Blip Billboards. If you'd like to become a sponsor, get in touch with us at hello@iamsaltlake.com.
You all have a great week. Get out and enjoy the city, support local, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Good night, Grammy.